Hi, and welcome to a Bright Talk conversation at Money 2020 Europe. I'm Tony Craddock. I'm the Director General of the Emerging Payments Association in the UK, and I'm always excited to get involved with companies and people who know a little bit about where this industry is going. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Swain, who is the author of Banking 2020. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much, Tony.
So I've got a few questions about your fascinating book. Can you tell me a little bit about where the greatest opportunities are and the scale of the greatest opportunities in banking going forward?
Sure. Well, the commercial banking industry, for one, is a very huge industry. And just to put it into perspective, it's 10 times the size of the global beer industry. It's 3 times the size of the global airline industry. And it's about the same size as the global oil and gas industry. So it's a $2 trillion industry, Tony. And we're here at Money 2020 for these few days because most of the businesses here are trying to figure out how they can capture their share of that $2 trillion opportunity.
So there's over 10,000 people here, there's 250 plus companies exhibiting. Who's making the money?
Well, right now in global commercial banking, the big incumbents are still making the money. The $2 trillion global banking market is roughly split 50% retail and 50% institutional and corporate. So broadly $1 trillion each. And in most markets around the world still, there are the big 4 or the big 5 banks. And they usually have about 60 to 70% market share. So they are making the majority of the money currently, but that's not to say it will be the way moving forward.
So how do we think the competitive landscape is going to evolve?
Well, it's going to evolve in many interesting ways, Tony. First of all, the big 4 or 5 in a lot of the major markets around the world are facing increased competition from other major banks. That may be international banks coming in from offshore or tier 2 banks within that market challenging more aggressively on major tenders and major transactions. But then there is a whole wave, as we know and as we see here, of digital challenger banks, peer-to-peer lenders, and new technology entrants that are entering, wanting their slice of that $2 trillion pie.
So what are the critical success factors for the winners and the losers going forward? What's going to determine whether the people investing significant funds of investment capital in some of these early stage businesses are going to be the winners? And how are we going to be sure that of those big 5, they're all going to still survive?
Well, I deal with a lot of fintechs, predominantly in Asia and Australia, and I find that the companies, not just the fintechs, but the businesses in this business that are really succeeding, are the ones that are asking themselves 3 questions, and they are, what problem does my product or service solve? Mm-hmm. Why are we remarkable or different? And the third one, which is critically important, is what is the compelling event for customer adoption? Because you cannot just have 2, you have to have why would someone decide to switch from where they are now? It could be a big incumbent. Why will they switch to the new challenger or the peer-to-peer lender or the API payment provider? And I find the companies that are asking themselves those 3 questions and are getting a good answer back are the ones that are making good progress.
Yeah, brilliant. So the interesting thing, of course, is you've got the startup, scale-up, early-stage businesses with 5, 10, 15, $100 million worth of investment capital, but they're not really anything other than an inconvenience to the big banks, potentially a big partner. There are some very big organizations, the GAFAs, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon type organizations, that are equally as large as some of these big banks, in fact, of course, larger in some cases. To what extent do they play a role in the evolving banking landscape going forward?
Well, the banking landscape is very much businesses also focusing on niches. So we're seeing at a smaller level companies like TransferWise, for instance, entering from outside the market as a startup in 2011. And they picked a certain piece of the pie, the retail international payments transfers, and they're doing 2 billion sterling in transfers per month. So that's an example of someone coming from outside of the interest, outside of the industry, and really picking a part of it to focus on. It's not necessarily that easy for some of the really big tech companies to succeed in financial services, as we have seen from some companies such as Facebook, who have found it not quite as easy to conquer the payments area as other parts of social media. But interestingly, I'm seeing a wave of also super apps, particularly in Asia, like Alipay, Paytm, the Grab applications. The wave of super apps coming sort of as that second level down behind the Googles, the Facebooks, that are really starting to get momentum.
And things like Grab, taxi app, starts as a taxi app, it then adds payments, and now is providing a whole range of extra services to the taxi ride passenger. Fascinating.
And it goes back to what I mentioned before, Tony, about asking those three important questions. What problem are you solving? Why are you remarkable or different? And why should people adopt you? And I think Grab are an example where they've solved real problems of transportation and connectivity, and it's enabled them to scale up in multiple markets around the world very quickly.
So to what extent should the incumbent banking industry see organizations like that as partners or as threats?
Well, really, banking is moving from, traditionally banks have said this is the way we do things, but customers are now saying this is the way we want things. And that's driven largely by experiences in other industries such as travel, Airbnb, transport, Uber, and platforms, Facebook and similar. So those expectations are coming into the world of financial services, and the companies that are really going to succeed, whether it be the incumbents or the new starters, will be the ones who really focus on the customer and get those customer problems solved and those solutions right for the customer.
That's so hard if you're in an organization that employs 60,000 people and that's been around, got a heritage for 75 years. How can those organizations ever have a hope of getting sufficiently in tune with the customer to be able to compete with an organization that maybe's got 50 customers or 50 employees?
The customer is king now, and the customer will demand what is required, and those businesses will have to adapt. And they will have to adapt their own technology stacks. They will have to adopt their own digital transformation agendas, and they will also have to partner and work with other providers where they don't have the capability to reach the consumers and deliver what they want for them.
So what about Facebook's cryptocurrency being launched next year?
Well, it's an interesting space, cryptocurrency at the moment. As someone said to me the other day, can you buy a hamburger with a cryptocurrency yet? So I haven't seen that yet. I think when that happens, we'll know whoever achieves that transaction will be the first to make it through.
So coming to the end of this conversation, it's always fascinating talking to somebody who's an author.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about your book and what it's trying to achieve.
Well, really, it's there's so much going on at the moment with banking and technology colliding, and it's difficult for people just to keep up with what is going on at the moment. So I've really brought this together to help people get an appreciation of everything that's going on in this $2 trillion industry right now. And it really focuses on the size of the market, what the key challenges are, where the future opportunities are, what the future's likely to look like, and also looks at the competitive strategies of major players around the world. So it's a great one place to get an appreciation of what's happening right now as we move to 2020 and beyond.
Very good. So, ladies and gentlemen, I really commend Banking 2020. Thank you for your interest in attending and listening into this. The question is, $2 trillion, how are you going to get your unfair share of that very large market? Thank you very much indeed, and all the best from the Bright Talk conversation at Money 2020 Europe.